All right, work to positivity is the way to go. He has worked for 10 seasons for the National Hockey League team in public relations department. And he also worked in public relations for the National Lacrosse League in the front office as a VP. Welcome my guest today, Bruce Ray Wonka.
How you doing, Dion?
I'm doing all right, man. I heard you was a big Tampa Bay, and you was big into hockey, so that's why I want to hell you on and stuff.
I'm big into here in Tampa Bay, the Lightning, the Buccaneers, and the Rays, but we can certainly talk hockey. I would say that's probably my longtime number one sport.
Well, yeah, I know you're a big Alex Ovechkin fan. So what are your thoughts on Alex Ovechkin, man, and how great he been? He got 900 goals. Do you think the Washington Capitals gonna win another championship, or you think he just hounding up the goal streak to end his career?
Well, number one, I am not an Alexander Ovechkin fan. He is the enemy. He plays for Washington and Tampa Bay. We just had a game against Washington where the Lightning won, thankfully. And Alex Ovechkin, I respect that he has had a long and successful career. I've never liked him because I think it is what you said. I think a lot of times he is trying to pad the stats, and I know that's not a popular thing to say. And you don't get to 900 goals by being lucky, but at the same time, it's a very different game today than it was back when Wayne Gretzky played, and he broke Gretzky's mark last year. But I do keep an eye on Ovechkin when the Lightning play him to see what his game looks like in 2025. And I feel like you do see times when he's kind of cherry picking, when he's hanging out. I don't want to say looking for something easy, but he's not really in there um, getting banged in front of the net, like the younger guys. And I get it, because of his age. Uh, I don't know that the Capitals are in a place where they can really make a run at the Stanley Cup. They've got a great goaltender, but I think there's some other teams out there this season in particular that probably have a more complete team. I'll put it to you that way.
Well, what do you think about well the thing is I think Washington is they're a playoff team. They be in the playoffs, but they typically don't do anything because I think he do pass Stacks, but people like him because he's great, and he passed Wayne Gretzky, he the all-time goals leader, so people, you got to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah, of course.
So, what are your thoughts about the NHL? Like a lot of people are casual fans with the NHL. They get into it in the playoffs. Do you think the regular season really matters and everything with and why do the NHL viewership go up in the playoffs compared to the regular season with the 82 game season that they have?
Well, I'll answer those questions in reverse order. I think the viewership goes up for obvious reasons. The stakes are a lot higher and there's more on the line, especially once you get to an elimination game. Everybody wants to watch, to see if one team is going to advance or to see if the team that's on the brink of elimination, if in fact their season is going to end. And the further that you go along, the closer that you get to the cup. So I think certainly the viewership is always going to go up in the playoffs. The way that the league is structured over the last several years, Dion, they have it where you're playing your rivals in the playoffs. The Lightning seem to be playing the Panthers very regularly. So, those rivalries build up and more people want to watch those games. As opposed to the first part of your question, over the course of a long 82 game season, you know, I'm just going to throw out a team here. I don't mean any disrespect to this team, but I'll just randomly say if Tampa Bay is playing St. Louis on a Tuesday night in November, that's not going to get anybody really excited. But I think the 82 game season is necessary. Number one, it's very entertaining. But number two, you go through this kind of, I'll call it a roller coaster, I'll call it a soap opera, where you've got guys who were hurt in the preseason and maybe their season is starting late. You have other guys that go into slumps and all of a sudden they wake up and it's time for them to start scoring goals like crazy. Maybe after the first of the year, you get teams that get hot at the right time. So the 82 games, it also gives the coaches a sense to see, what is our team identity this year and what adjustments do we need to make before the trade deadline so that we can make a serious run at the cup and not just say, like you did about Washington, yay, we made the playoffs. I don't think, Dion, I don't think fans are content anymore with their team just making the playoffs, because if you just make the playoffs and you get knocked out in the first round every year, what did you really accomplish other than to say we made the playoffs?
Well, I think the thing is, I think they should have less games in the regular season. The NBA, they've been having the same issue, people not into the season, they have low management. So I think if you lower the games will mean more. They got too many games probably in the NHL, the regular season, just like the NBA, because they want to get money and revenue, and the owners, they want to making sure that they get money and everything. So they having the games be like that in the season and stuff, the regular season, so they continue to get revenue and butts in the seats.
Well, interestingly enough, there has been talk of the NHL potentially adding 2 more games to the schedule and going to 84 instead of 82 games. I think really, Dion, what has helped the NHL, and maybe people have withstood that long season more, is all of this international emphasis that you're seeing. They had the Four Nations Challenge. In February, we're going to have the Olympics. They tried to do the World Cup of Hockey when they can, and that adds a whole new flavor to it. And people who are casual fans, because it is like you're talking about timeline, because those tournaments are such a short time span, they may go on for a week, maybe 10 days at the most. People will give the amount of time to watch as those require. Okay, I'll give a week to watching these games. I'll give 10 days to watching this tournament, because they know they're going to real fast go from the start of the tournament to somebody being crowned the champion of that tournament. And so what that does is it kind of re-energizes fans, and in some cases reintroduces them to the game of hockey, and they get so hopped up on it that they say, I got to watch a game now. And the next thing you know, they're watching the Islanders and the Rangers beat each other up in a great rivalry. So I think, to the NHL's credit, the emphasis that they've put on international play has helped them. And then vice versa, these European players who are coming over from the larger rinks, they have no problem making the adjustment to the NHL game. So I think it's been a really good formula for them. And you're right. At the end of the day, they're trying to find whatever ways they can to generate revenue. It's just like the outdoor games, or any gimmick that they can come up with that makes something unique. It boosts the ratings, it boosts the attendance, and it boosts the bottom line, which is their back pocket.
Well, oddly enough, as you say about the outdoor game, they got 2 outdoor games on the NHL Network this Friday and Saturday. And guess the Buffalo Sabres is going to be in both of the games. So they get to have 2 outdoor games
Well, and
in a 3-day span, which I don't understand why they don't have different teams.
yeah, I think it's interesting that they're going to have a game here in Tampa outside, and they're also going to have a game over in Sunrise where the Florida Panthers play, which I think is kind of the NHL saying, look, Tampa Bay and Florida have won so many Stanley Cups over the last 4, 5, 6 years combined, that we got to start acknowledging that there's championship hockey being played in the state of Florida. And if we can somehow pull it off and make it work, we should reward those fans and those cities and those franchises with outdoor games. Buffalo, I think, is a team that's always going to get put into outdoor games because they're a cold weather city. And so they're a logical opponent. But you're right. They should give other teams a chance to play, and not just kind of keep going back to the same teams over and over.
Well, yeah, because if you want ratings, you got to have the Rangers and the Blackhawks in there and stuff. Because I'm in Chicago, and the hockey team here, they're in rebuild mode. And the thing is, a lot of people that's fan going to the games, but when you're in a big city, they don't want to continue to have rebuild. They don't like the word rebuild. The Blackhawks, I think the ownership is cheap. Jerry Ransdorf. I think that they don't want to spend no money at all. That's why they ain't competing at all. Like when they had Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, they not competing because they don't want to spend money. You got to spend money these days. I know hockey salary cap is different from other ones, but you got to spend money in order to win. That's like that with any sport. Look at the Dodgers.
Yeah,
And you got to have blue guys.
and I think when you get a team like Buffalo, they're in last place right now in their division. And this is a team that year after year after year after year misses the playoffs. Out of NBA, NFL, MLB, and NBA, football, baseball, hockey, basketball, out of the four sports combined, Buffalo has the longest streak of missing the playoffs. And my point is, if they are going to do everything they can to make the playoffs, they probably don't want to be playing in outdoor games because it is kind of a novelty. It's a rink that they're not used to playing in. The conditions are very different, and they need every point. If they're going to get victories to try to get into the playoffs, they probably don't want to be playing in outdoor games, but that's where you have to be a good business partner. You see, I'm holding up quotes. You have to be a good business partner and say, okay, we'll agree to play in these games. And the coach is probably saying, if it was up to me, absolutely not.
Yeah, well said, man. But Buffalo, I don't think they're gonna make playoffs this year anyway, because the NHL is very competitive, man.
Yeah, and it's a very tough division. Let's face it, Montreal has come out like gangbusters so far this season. Tampa Bay, thankfully, we have refound our legs and have
Well,
won
you got
six of our last
Kucherov, man.
seven.
You had
We have,
Kucherov and Stamkos, so y'all have had good players and stuff. So y'all been spoiled, Tampa Bay. Well, not the Rays though.
yeah,
The Rays, they're just the Rays. They not so good.
yeah, the
We
Lightning,
ain't gonna even talk about the
Kucherov,
Rays. That's another story for another
Ku-
day.
Yeah, Kucherov is actually not having a very Kucherov-like season so far, but it's early. But then you get someone like Anthony Cirelli, who is having a season unlike anybody would have expected from him. Brandon Hagel has started finding the back of the net again. There's always Braden Point. Then you've got Jake Gensel, who has just been a tremendous pickup since we got him beginning of last season from Carolina. And of course, Vasilevsky and net when he's on his game. There's still a great core there. Ryan McDonough, I was thrilled when they brought him back to our defense before the start of last year. So there's still a solid core there, and they're just getting these young guys to get used to the system, to get used to playing games on a regular basis, and it is starting to come together, thankfully.
Well said, because Rain McDonough, he was with the Rangers and stuff, and look at the Rangers now. They didn't even score a goal for like 5 straight games at home. They
Mm.
got shut out like 5 straight games. They could use Rain McDonough right now.
Yeah, they can
So
because they're in the bottom half of their division, and we know how the
yeah,
New York fans are. The New York fans will not put up
well
with it
yeah,
for long.
they just fired Brian David from the Giants, so you could tell they don't have patience. Aaron Glenn
Yeah,
may be on out the door next with the Jets, and he just got there first year.
yeah,
So
that's right.
so let's get what do you think the difference between the lacrosse and hockey is? Because I know you did both ownership in
Yeah.
both different leagues. So what do you think the differences are?
Well, there, if you're a hockey fan, and I'm just going to talk right now, I'm just going to talk about indoor lacrosse or box lacrosse, as they call it in Canada. If you're a hockey fan, you will like indoor lacrosse. You will like box lacrosse because it looks like hockey. There's five guys out there in front of a goaltender, and it's kind of the same concept. Now, the scoring is a lot higher in indoor lacrosse typically. The hitting, I would say, is the same, and there's a lot of speed to the game of indoor lacrosse. There's a lot of speed to the game of outdoor lacrosse, field lacrosse, as they call it, as it's played at the college level and internationally. But there's so much appeal because there are so many similarities. Now, it's interesting, though, that if you look at some of the slight differences, right? Because a team can go on the power play in indoor lacrosse, just like it can go on the power play in hockey. But in lacrosse, the shots are coming from the top down, whereas in hockey, it's coming from the ice up. So it's a very different sport for the goaltenders, right? Because the goaltenders are the ones who are having to position themselves to get used to where the shot is coming from. And like I said, I'm talking about top down or ice up, as opposed to it's coming from my left, it's coming from my right. I mean, there's a lot of play right in front of the net, just like there is in hockey. You'll get called for a crease violation in indoor lacrosse, And I really fell in love with the sport, Dion. My gosh, I'm going to date myself, but 30 years ago when I first saw it, I, because I had grown up watching hockey, it was so comparable. And they play in the same rink. The National Lacrosse League, they play in the same rink where professional hockey games are being played, whether it's the National Hockey League or the American Hockey League. So it feels so similar that as a spectator, you're going to be drawn to it right away.
Well, Bill Belichick, he a big lacrosse guy, he loved lacrosse, He always talk about lacrosse and everything. And a lot of people that play lacrosse, they playing basketball right now. Look at Pat Spencer. He played basketball he played lacrosse with I think Albany or something. Then he played basketball with Northwestern. Now he in the NBA now.
Well,
So
30 years ago, they would talk about Wayne Gretzky, Adam Oates, Joe Nieuwendyk, guys like that who were NHL names, but they all played lacrosse. And nowadays, you hear announcers that will refer to a lacrosse style goal. You'll see someone like Trevor Zegras, who plays for the Flyers, that got to start with the Anaheim Ducks, and the way that he'll skate behind the net. And there was also somebody for Carolina. I think it was. I'm going to say the wrong name. It was a Russian player for Carolina Hurricanes who was scoring those goals that same way. So there's a lot of crossover.
and that's a great thing because you're going to be versatile. That's what parents teach their kids today. Be versatile, play different sports and everything. So, can you tell me more about you and what sets you apart from other people, Bruce?
Well, I'm trying to think if I should answer that question personally or professionally.
Either way, you can answer it both. Both ways.
I think, Dion, one thing that I have found is a lot of people will talk about the gift of gab. And a lot of times when someone says it, they're trying to be kind of funny, they're trying to be kind of sarcastic. And I got to a point where I made peace with the fact that I was blessed with the gift of gab instead of saying, I know, I talk too much, because I've been able to use that gift of gab to be an announcer, to be a podcaster, and because I'm a publicist, there's a lot of communication involved as a publicist. I'm also very active as a speaker. So to become a speaker, to become a broadcaster, to become a podcaster, it tells me that I kind of recognize that gift of gab that I was given. And instead of just being someone who talks for the sake of hearing himself talk, I'm using it for a purpose. And in the case of the sports broadcasting that I do, I feel like I'm being helpful to people, because when I broadcast University of Tampa lacrosse or softball, I know that there are parents hundreds or even 1,000 miles away that are watching their son or their daughter play, and they're counting on that broadcast to see their son or their daughter's game. When I'm podcasting, I don't do a solo podcast. I'm always interviewing people. So I feel like I'm using that gift of gab to get the word out about who this guest is, to help get their story out, to help myself make connections. And same thing with being a speaker. When I go on stages, I'm going to bring some value to an audience, to teach them something, hopefully to entertain them a little bit, just like with my podcast. So I would say that's what sets me apart, because we all know people who talk too much, and sometimes it's you're waiting for them to stop, and I hope that's not the case with people who see me speak or who listen to my podcasts or who are watching the broadcast that I'm on.
Well, what was the best call that you made when you broadcast sports? Like, you want to show the audience some of the calls that you do?
Well, I don't know that I'll recreate them, but I have had the fortune of calling some walk-offs, University of Tampa women's softball, a walk-off base hit. They don't really get too many home runs because their home stadium is so big that it's really, really difficult to clear the outfield fences. But there's been some nice walk-off hits that I've had the pleasure of calling. In the men's lacrosse, I know that there's been games where someone has scored, say, in the final 10 seconds. I've also called some conference championship games. So it's been exciting to be on the call as the team that you're the broadcaster for wins the conference championship, and then goes on to start NCAA play. Those are lots of fun.
So you can't give us a call. It's okay, Bruce, man. Maybe some other time. I tried to get it out of you, man. He like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not working.
I don't know. My voice doesn't feel quite up to par today, so
Your voice do
I'll
feel like
hide.
a one, Bruce. Maybe at
I'll
the
hide.
end.
Okay.
So what do you like and dislike about your city, about Tampa Bay?
Oh, I could spend this whole podcast talking about how what I like about it. I love it here. I love it here. I would say the thing that I dislike is that I didn't move here sooner. I've been in Florida for 25 years now, and I love it so much that I often tell people that I probably should be working for the Convention and Visitors Bureau because I'm such a big booster of the Tampa Bay area. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people just immediately default to, oh, because of the weather. And I say, if that was the only thing here, then, you know, then I'm missing something because there's a lot of cities that have nice weather that they could brag about. But, Tampa Bay, yes, we have great weather. I love the proximity to so many other cities. I can go over to Disney in the greater Orlando area. I can go to Daytona Beach. I have an aunt and uncle that live up in Jacksonville. I can go down to Miami. I mean, heck, in a couple days, I'm going up to the Panhandle. That's, not even a 7-hour drive. You can drive 7 hours the other way and be down in the Keys. So there's so many things to do here. And really, Dion, the thing that I really admire about the city of Tampa is that they get things done. And you always see the city growing. You always see new developments going up. You always see new businesses. You see companies that are moving here. In other words, it's not a city where they talk about things getting done, but they never get done, or they get held up in committee, or they get held up in red tape. Because I know cities where they talk about things for years and years and years that they're going to do, and they never do them. And I love that that's not the case here.
Well, do you think that the Rays are going to build the stadium that they said? Because you said Tampa Bay, a city of action. So why haven't the Rays got a new stadium then? They not at Tropicana Field no more. They at a minor league ballpark. When they gonna get that stadium, Bruce? Commissioner Bruce
So they
or
do.
Secretary Bruce?
They do have a couple years left on their lease at Tropicana Field. They only played at the Yankees spring training stadium this year because of the damage that was done to the roof of the Trop with the storm a year ago. So next year they'll be back at the Trop. 2027 they'll be back at the Trop, and I think 2028 also, because I think this whole storm damage delayed everything by a year. But they just got sold, and I think that's going to be the difference maker. I think this new owner is going to make it a top priority to make sure that we get a stadium built in Tampa Bay and not across the bridge in St. Pete. They've for all intents and purposes washed their hands of continuing to have St. Petersburg be the home of the Rays. So I think this new blood, I think this new owner is going to be the difference. Why didn't they do it before? I think Stuart Sternberg just ran into too many difficulties. Whether they were his own fault or the city or the county, that's not for me to say. But I think now that he sold the team, I think the new ownership group is going to get it done.
Well, they got to spend money though, Bruce. That's the problem with the Rays. They never spend money at all. They got to get some big time free agents. They got to get some more hype around them because they known for being a gritty team that pitch well. They got Shane McClanahan and stuff. But the thing is, though, they got to be more than that for pitching. They got to compete with the Yankees and look at the Blue Jays, and then the Red Sox, and then the
Yeah.
Orioles. We don't know how they're gonna be next year. So you got the NL East, the AL East is like a beast. So they got to compete with those teams. The Blue Jays in the World Series, they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Look what
Yeah.
Guerrero Jr. did, historic numbers in the World Series.
There was something very interesting written in the Tampa Bay Times recently where the sports columnist was saying that, yes, getting a new stadium built has to be the priority. But he said that as the Rays move into a new stadium and in a few years, when the A's settle in Las Vegas, his opinion that he wrote in the paper was that they need to do something about realignment because he feels that there's going to be a couple new teams added. And he said exactly what you're talking about, Dion, which is that's going to be the opportunity to say, okay, we can't have the Rays competing in a division with big spending teams like the Yankees and Boston, et cetera. And yes, they do need to spend more money on payroll. The Rays need to spend more money on payroll, but they're not going to jump from being near the bottom of the league all the way up to competing with the likes of the Yankees and the Dodgers in terms of spending. And so I don't mind this idea that this journalist floated out that maybe it's time. And I know that that brings up the question of you're still going to face these teams in the playoffs, but in the regular season, I think it levels the playing field a little bit more, pardon the pun. So I think, I'm not hiding from it. The Rays certainly have a lot of work to do off the field, which is, I was pleasantly surprised that they kept Brandon Lau. I was pleasantly surprised that they kept Taylor Walls. But the work doesn't end there. They've got to be busy this offseason with the roster, and they've got to be busy this offseason with finalizing a site to build a new stadium in Tampa.
Yeah, because look at the scandal with Wander Franco. You know what he did in the Dominican Republic. You know that had a shadow over y'all season all year and stuff. You know, because he was a good player, and then he went and go did something stupid. You know, like mess with underage women, which I do not recommend at all. You know, even if it is the Dominican Republic. You know, so did y'all hear articles about that? I bet y'all had stories about that, Bruce.
Yeah, unfortunately, Wander was somebody that I was really looking forward to watching for many, many years in Tampa Bay. He seems to think that this is all going to be overturned in court and then he's going to come back.
No, his career. I think his career is over with. That's like the baseball scandal with Emmanuel Clase, Luis Ortiz. One ain't never playing baseball no more. He had to go to Japan or somewhere. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
they gonna do what they did with Trevor Bauer. You know, but I think Trevor
exactly.
Bauer got a better chance to get back in the league than Wanda or Emmanuel because they went to jail for mess with a minor or gambling. You know.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, MLB just had such a great ending to the season with the dramatic World Series.
Yeah, and then
And
they
then
had a
it
scandal like the NBA did.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. The NBA opened their season with a scandal and MLB closed their season with a scandal, which is so unfortunate for both of them.
Yeah, we got to be careful with the NHL now, man. They come for they come for everybody, man.
That's right. That's
They
right.
like we not playing. We gonna play whoever. But it ain't the star players that's bad though. It's people. It's like lower level names, you know.
But
But
Dion, I give
who do
them a lot of
you?
credit that they're working with the casinos to flag this kind of stuff where they catch these things right away as soon as they see some sort of betting irregularities and they're in contact with the major professional sports leagues to let them know because right away they can start the investigation. And I think it does send a message to the players to not even consider that sort of behavior.
That's why I don't bet at all. You ain't gonna never see me on no sports book, DraftKings. You ain't gonna see me nowhere. I'm risk adverse, Bruce. So, who do you think got the better chance to win the championship in Tampa Bay next?
Well, at the beginning of the season, a lot of
Tough
people were
question.
saying,
That's why I'm here, Bruce. I got to put you on the
sorry,
spot, man.
I didn't
I
hear what
said,
you
I know
said.
tough question, you know.
Yeah, it is a
I
tough
said,
question because
sorry, I know I'm asking a tough question. Yeah.
yeah, it's not the Rays. And at the beginning of the season, everybody was putting the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl conversation. I didn't really feel it. I knew that we would win the division. I knew that, we'd get into the playoffs. But I just don't see it. I watch every second, I watch every play of every Buccaneers games, and I just don't see a Super Bowl caliber team. That would leave the Lightning, and so long as they have the players that you and I talked about earlier, so long as they have John Cooper as the coach, there's always a chance. And if you say out of the Lightning, the Rays, and the Buccaneers, who has the best chance of getting a championship next, I would have to say the Lightning.
Yeah, well, it's by default because the Buccaneers that lost to the Patriots. I think the Buccaneers got injuries though, man. That's
They
derailing
do.
them because if they had all their weapons on wide receiver, man, they'll be rolling on all cylinders. But they got
But
injuries though. That's what's happening.
But at the beginning of the season, when everybody was healthy, they were just barely winning games. that they should have won without having to go down to the last minute of the game. And when you do that too many times, I think that kind of reveals what your team really is. To have all your guys healthy and to have to just squeak by a team like the Jets in the last minute of the game, to have Atlanta miss a field goal in order for you to win a game, that shows you that maybe you don't have the horses that you think you do.
Well, as long as you got Baker, you have a chance. You got the quarterback. You know, you ain't a quarterback purgatory like other teams. So, Bruce, you got to be positive. You know that you got a quarterback. You know, you ain't like the Jets or other teams that wish they would have had a Baker Mayfield, like Cleveland. You know, they
That's
don't have
true.
no quarterback at all. You know, at least you
That's
don't got to
true.
be. You got that same offensive, defensive players. You know. So why has lacrosse why is lacrosse so big in North America right now?
Well, I think that it's so widely played now. We have leagues all over down here in Florida, and I keep referring to 30 years ago, but 30 years ago, you would have never heard of people playing lacrosse in Florida. And now, UT has such a successful program. I mean, there's programs all over the state, but you could play anywhere. It's very accessible. They used to label it as a rich kid sport, and it's not. You got kids that are walking around with lacrosse sticks out in the playground, out in the park, because they've seen it on ESPN. Whether it is the professional leagues or whether it's college lacrosse, and this is a game that, if you compare it to football, right? Football gets such a bad rap because of the helmets and all the pads. That implies that you're probably going to get hurt. There's a high risk of injury, I should say. Not you're probably going to get hurt, but there's a high risk of injury. Whereas lacrosse really emphasizes the speed. So if you're in shape and you can run constantly because there's so much running in the game, I think people like that. It combines some of those elements of a few different games, and it's a fast game that doesn't require you to wear all kinds of padding, and you don't hear of guys that are suffering from CTE from having played lacrosse. I think it's got an awful lot going for it, and the national governing body for lacrosse has done a wonderful job of growing the sport across the country.
Well, Bruce, it was a pleasure having you on, man. And I know you're gonna be watching the Lightning and the Buccaneers. I don't know who the Buccaneers playing this Sunday.
They're playing at Buffalo. That's going to be a very tough
Oh
game.
yeah.
Very tough game.
Well, Buffalo just got their butt whooped though. They gave up 225 yards to HM, but I think they're gonna be mad. And I think Buffalo may win this game. Well, my predictions have not been right lately. I had a guess on. I was talking to Albert, and I said that the Colts was gonna win, and they lost. They turned about over 6-10. So I don't know. He's probably like, "Yeah, pick the Bills." You know,
It's
they
it's going to
call
be
that
a
the they
very
call it
very difficult road game for the Bucks.
well they call that the KOD pick when people pick games wrong, Bruce. The kiss of death, you know. But it was a pleasure having you on today, man. And you have a
Thank you,
great day.
Dion. Thank you.